you ever dreamed of making good change in the world? Of making a genuine difference to improve the world that you reside in? Have you ever wondered why it seemed the leaders of this world, the most powerful and influential people, tend to be the worst in character? Why it seems very few times the most powerful and wealthy people seem to actually desire for good change, for virtue? Why it seems that no matter how many people truly desire good change, nothing good really happens due to the most influential people? I give a reason. It's pragmatism. Those with the most power in the world are oftentimes those who are willing to do what it takes to take and hold that power. Those people who are willing to do terrible and great things for themselves. Virtuous people unwilling to do what it takes to take and hold power oftentimes fail to make real meaningful change because they're unwilling to do what it takes. Take someone like Napoleon Bonaparte. His legacy is tainted. He's done both great and terrible things. We see in his personal writings, he felt love, he cared about his children and family and lovers, and yet, he's killed millions. People who are willing to change the world are those willing to sacrifice, and by that very nature, those who are willing to make those sacrifices, those cruel and unusual people, oftentimes are the ones with power, with the ability to make change. These people, Idi Amin, Saddam Hussein, Pol Pot, all of these people who have done terrible things, why is it that they, the worst of humanity, seem to be the ones who wield the reins of reality, those who can turn that wheel of existence? It's because they're willing to sacrifice anything for their greater ambition. And that's my call to action to every person who truly dreams of good change in the world, to be willing to do what it takes. I think those people who are truly altruistic, who believe in the good of mankind and believe the world could do better, are those who are unwilling to do what it takes, those who get caught up on details, those who get caught up on the small things, those who can't see the bigger picture. If any of you desire to make the world a better place, you must be willing to act to make that change. No statement has any meaning behind it of true importance if you're unwilling to put your arms to it. We can speak of making the world a better place, speak of theories and how things should be, but until we're willing to enforce our beliefs and our desires onto the world, we have made no change. The entire world revolves around dynamics of power. Everything from the smallest and insignificant HOA or friend group gossiping to the halls of the Pentagon, White House, and Kremlin, all of them depend on power dynamics. All of them depend on manipulation. All of them depend on deals behind others' backs. It isn't a reality I want for us as humans. It isn't a reality that I'm saying is ideal. It simply is and cannot be changed. We shouldn't lament the conditions of our world. We should embrace them as the rules to the game that we need to win if we want to make the change we desire. I need to reiterate, those who want to make good change rarely are those willing to do what it takes to achieve the power need to make meaningful change. People like Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi, they're idolized for the fact that they were willing to do things peacefully without enforcing through brutality their desires. But if we look into the conditions that made their revolutions possible, the reason why we view them in such high regard oftentimes is because they've been put on that pedestal by the powerful who fear violent revolution. Mahatma Gandhi was not the only Indian independence fighter. Even though he made peaceful change, and we remember him as the first leader of India, he only became idolized because he was the most moderate of any independence fighter. He was the least militant. Same goes for Martin Luther King Jr. Did anyone here know Martin Luther King Jr. was a socialist? We intentionally have forgotten that detail because we try to portray these martyrs as people who are moderate. But in truth, it is power and violence and extremism that does make change. Niccolo Machiavelli was a Renaissance Italian writer, and he was hated in his era for the fact that he spoke what no others wanted to admit. In a Catholic and society revolving around virtue, he admitted that kings weren't ruling because they were chosen by God for their virtue. No, they ruled because they were willing to slaughter their enemies. They were willing to root out their opposition. They were willing to do what it takes to grasp and hold power. Monarchs would have 7 children, and oftentimes by the time the next king was chosen, there would be maybe 1 or 2 of those children left. Not just because of medieval disease or low life expectancies, but because they would slaughter each other for that coveted throne. Each and every one of them competed for power. It is the same cycle that has begun since the very moment life on Earth started. The very first life forms competed with each other on who would reproduce and pass on their DNA and who would be relegated to the annals of history. Competition is the natural state of life, and if we are unwilling to compete, to impart our will onto the world, then we will make no significant change. This is a map of every single battle in human history. Every recorded battle, anyway. Every single one of these is an example of 2 wills competing and deciding what will be the fate of this world, or even small environments. Humanity is warlike and violent, and we live in the greatest moment of peace in human history. We are lucky in the era that we live in that the closest war is over 500 miles away on a completely different continent. But this is the natural condition of humanity. We live in the exception of peace, not the standard. Heraclitus was an ancient Greek philosopher. He was one of the very first people who wrote this process of competition that all life goes through down. He wrote this over 2,000 years ago. He coveted war. He declared it as a virtue. And that isn't necessarily true in the way that we think of virtue today. But in his era, virtue was purely what did and didn't happen. You can see in ancient Greek mythology, gods are cruel. They're ambiguous. They do as they please. And that's the world that he saw, and that's why he viewed war as something virtuous, to force your will onto another. I don't say that it's a good thing to force your will onto others, but I am saying that force is needed to make your dreams a reality. That there will be competition. That is the natural condition of life. Even now, where we're standing, this painting is of the Second Seminole War. We have no right to this land by anything but conquest. 200 years ago, the Seminole people lived on this land, and they themselves were a coalition of different native groups coalescing in Florida, fleeing European conquest. We defeated and slaughtered them down to the last 300 people, who now their descendants live in the Florida Everglades. We took Florida from them. We had no nobility, no virtue, nothing that made us any better than them as people, and yet we still have a right to this land by nothing but conquest. It was power that gave us the right to live here. It was power that gave us, any of us, the right to exist. That our ancestors fought and died to give us the right to exist. Because no superior moral value is going to secure that. No, it was purely violence. Much of this speech was inspired by this book that I recently read, The Dictator's Handbook by Bruce Bueno. I have been feeling disillusioned with the world, watching more and more as these institutions of peace.
Putting my work aside here in case I need to submit the speech as is. Due to technical difficulties with the recording, it cuts here, and upon delivering the rest of the speech, I didn't actually realize till now editing and getting ready to submit that the entire speech wasn't recorded. I have my works cited on screen, so that at the very least I may be able to salvage a few points. I'm really disappointed with how this turned out, although I hope the content of the speech that was shown before, at the very least, can salvage me some points. I'm hoping I'll have the opportunity to redo this speech before the due date, although if I don't, this will likely be the video I'm submitting.